Very good. Okay, here we are with Arno Ilgner. Is it Ilgner? Is that right?
That's right. You have to get the I before the L and make sure you pronounce the G.
The G. Ilgner. Yeah.
Ilgner. Yep.
So you're author of Warrior's Way. Is that right?
Warrior's Way.
Rock Warrior's Way.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And Espresso Lessons.
Espresso Lessons.
Yep.
When I climbed at the Ascent when I was younger, I was in high school and I was the coach of the homeschool and Central Magnet team here.
Oh, okay.
And the homeschool team was known as the Rock Warriors, which I think was after your book at that time.
Yeah, my son Ian actually went to Central, and you may have coached him.
I probably did. We have an affiliate here who's kind of getting trained into some management stuff. I didn't recognize him, but he told me that I used to coach him at Central back in the day, which I went away to college in Iowa for 4 years, so I didn't even recognize him.
Iowa.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The climbing mecca. It's basically Spain, but, the Midwest. There is actually one outdoor climbing spot in Iowa that has limestone, and it's actually pretty decent. Yeah, pockety, sharp.
Yeah, you can find it if you're desperate.
Yeah, and I was.
And motivated.
Yeah. Well, because we would go out to Colorado sometimes on the weekends and just drive all night and get in, and every break we would go out to Colorado. But if you wanted to go do any outdoor climbing near Iowa that wasn't 10 hours away near Denver, it was like 2.5, 3 hours, and it's this little place called Pictured Rocks, which is in like northeast Iowa.
Okay.
Pretty decent limestone. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the Rock Warrior's Way. And Logan actually he has a copy of Espresso Lessons.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he's been reading that. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on attention. I'm just diving right in.
Yeah, attention. Well, it's obvious that attention would be important for mental training, right? So I think whoever's teaching mental training addresses use of attention to some degree. The way Warrior's Way approaches it is as its central core tenet. And you think about it, if you're going to perform a particular task, you need to have your attention focused on it.
Right.
So the core tenet of the material is that we need to have our attention focused in the moment on the task. Now you got to figure out what the tasks are. But when the way we identify it and structure it, we don't look at like all the different tasks in climbing. We look at the tasks for focusing attention. And there are basically two different ways to focus attention. You can focus it in the mind to do kind of cognitive thinking processes, decision making, or you can focus it in the body where it's more somatic. It's more somatically focused when you're actually taking action. So it's kind of a cool, simple structure where in climbing we know that you stop sometimes to rest and think, and then you go. And so the simplicity of it is just, okay, attention in a moment on the task. Well, when I stop, I need to make sure I'm doing my thinking tasks, my resting tasks, and my decision making. And then when I climb, I do a certain movement task, and if I fall, I do a falling task. And that's it.
So how do you use, from experience with, I think every climber has experience with getting really freaked out and getting really gripped on the wall. I've had moments where everything just leaves my mind. You just get so freaked out, you're so scared, you can't focus on anything except for that fear. So how do you use that attention, that sort of that process to get over that overcoming that fear?
Well, if you're in a state like that, sometimes it can be difficult or maybe even impossible to get it back because you're essentially in a panic zone. And if you're that deep into it, there's going to be just a survival mode, like fight, flight, or freeze. And so it's best to do your best not to get that deep into a risk or a situation. But whether you're there or some degree removed from that, like a little less stress, a little less fear, basically you need to determine what is the task I need to be doing here? Like as simple as, do I need to stop, rest, and think, or do I need to commit and go? And then do your best to focus your attention on what you actually need to do those particular tasks optimally.
So it seems like it kind of relates to commitment. It's almost like, I would think, right?
commitment's a big part.
Yeah.
Commitment and motivation are like core central issues in mental training.
So you're saying if you're focused on a task, let's say you're climbing, you're getting pumped out, you know you're going to fall. You have to direct your attention to committing to that fall in that moment. So it's almost like you're releasing, you're just letting go, saying, you know what, I know I'm going to fall. It's coming. I'm just going to commit to completing that task of falling safely. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
So first of all, you don't know you're going to fall.
Okay.
Until you're falling.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's an important point because an important saying that we have in the training is that you know something when you experience it, not before.
Mm-hmm.
Because consider that when you're climbing something challenging, you're going to get pumped, you're going to get stressed, the fears and doubts are going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And if we just give in to those doubts and react to them, then we're never going to push beyond what the mind perceives of what's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, but back to your situation, is essentially you need to, let's say you, quote, know you're going to fall.
Mm-hmm.
You can remind yourself, well, maybe I still have enough strength to hold on. I need to decide, first of all, do I need to stop and rest,
Mm-hmm.
reevaluate my situation, or do I need to, you might be just a few moves from another stance,
Mm-hmm.
another rest stance, where you can recover energy better. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to make a decision. Do I need to stop and rest or go up to that next stance and then recover there?
Right.
And you might fall in the process of doing that. Then you're focusing on doing the fall as well as you can.
So I'm kind of seeing I'm seeing three parts here. I'm seeing extensive planning, attention, and commitment. Would you agree with that? That planning kind of goes hand in hand with keeping that attention where it needs to be.
Well, it's part
route
of it.
planning and such like that.
In risk taking, there are three phases.
Okay.
There's preparation, where you think it through, gather information, think it through. There's decision making, where you transition from the thinking and preparation to action, and then there's action, where you engage your body and do it. And it's important to do each of those phases well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think we all tend to be biased toward doing one of them well or another well,
Mm-hmm.
but then not be balanced in all three. So, for an example, I tend to be a more intuitive climber, so I tend to trust my body and
Mm-hmm.
engage, but I don't think things through very well.
Mm-hmm.
Some climbers get lost in overthinking. They do the thinking, and then they just stay there, and they never take action.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, going through a critical thinking process to make sure you're gathering the appropriate information, what's necessary, and then knowing how to weigh that risk in the decision-making process so that you can be motivated to taking an appropriate risk,
Mm-hmm.
not something that's just going to possibly cause an injury.
Mm-hmm.
But then be able to set that aside when you decide to commit to taking action, and you fully commit to the effort that is required to act out the risk.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this is almost stress management in a way, that you're directing and redirecting your attention to each task, but really what you're doing is you're managing your physical stress and your mental or emotional stress. So I guess where I'm getting is when you're managing your stress, what is the most important thing to focus on with physical stress management? What is the most important thing to focus on with mental and emotional stress management when climbing? Because for me, I mean, physical stress, that's just the name of the game, right? That's climbing. Climbing is stress. It's stress on your tendons. It's stress on your muscles. Stress on your bones. That mental and emotional stress is, I think, that's what gets me. That lack of commitment. That lack of attention, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Stress is inevitable. It's like
Mm-hmm.
when we're struggling, when we're doing work, we're applying ourselves in something that's unfamiliar,
Mm-hmm.
right? Unknown. Otherwise, it would be stressful. It'd be comfortable. So, first of all, we need to see stress as something that's natural, not something that shouldn't be occurring.
Mm-hmm.
Which in climbing, it's easier to see. Yeah, hard climbing is stressful. In life, it's not like that so much. You have an argument with someone, you're like, well, what's wrong with them? You know,
Mm-hmm.
this shouldn't be happening. So there's a certain resistance to just accepting a situation as it is, the stress. But yeah, the physical stress, it is stress management. And because it's stress management, you have to make sure that you can manage it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that you're not going to be able to manage it if you're getting too deep into stress, into the panic zone. That's when you're going to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So another important part of our training is that you make sure that you're engaging learning situations, which is defined as getting a little bit into stress, working with your attention, and then converting that little bit of stress into comfort. So just gradually expanding your comfort zone through this conversion of stress to comfort. So stress is natural, and you manage it in this incremental way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important because our mind has a tendency, through all kinds of reasons,
Mm-hmm.
partly because of socialization through society's values, partly because the mind is an achievement, goal-oriented organ.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to, if we're just captured by the mind's motivation and achievement, then we're going to start thinking in all or nothing ways. Can I do it all or not? Instead of this slow incremental process to engage stress and manage it.
So you need to select those learning opportunities. You almost need to select something that is a manageable amount of stress, something that you know that you can handle, but you know it's gonna push you.
Yeah, it's going to push you a little bit.
Right.
You know, and that can look differently for different kinds of climbs. For a no-fall kind of climb, it might need to be just a little bit, you know, beyond what you've on-sighted before.
Right.
It's a no-fall kind of situation. If it's a red point, well, that's dependent on how much falling experience do you have and how far apart are the bolts or the protection pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be on a 512 or a 510 and it's not any different, you know, as far as the consequence and stress management between the two. You know, one's harder, but yeah, you can work it bolt to bolt and still kind of manage that mental and physical risk and stress.
So that all kind of falls within areas that are within your control. What about areas that aren't, like trusting gear? Because that's always been, like, let's say you've got a solid D-ring, solid bolt, and you're just climbing, and then you've got one bad one, and it's pretty run out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to trust that gear on some level. Well, then how do you manage that stress? How do you direct your attention on something that is not necessarily within your control? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
It does. I would say that if you're putting in your own trad gear, that you better learn how to trust it.
Right.
You know, and so that'll take some falling on it.
Right.
You know, where you need to, over time, as you're falling more and more on the pieces that you place, you develop, you know, experiential trust. You know, so if you're putting in a piece and it's like a C placement instead of an A plus placement, let's say, then you're kind of getting into the situation you're describing. You know, it might be a quote bad bolt, you know, where it's rusted out. You're not sure if it really is solid anymore, or you might have a marginal piece that you're placing. Well, at that point, you need to go through a thinking process to think about what kind of a risk are you facing here.
Right.
You know, like, in other words, you need to, with a risk, it has an end point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is the end of the risk, where you can get protection again? It has a certain consequence. You know, and that's, in this case, you might rip that piece, and it's the fall consequence. You need to understand what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you want to take it, but you need to be honest with yourself about what that consequence is. And then you're thinking about, okay, how can I climb this without falling so that I can achieve the goal and not realize the consequence? And so you're there, you're by this marginal piece of pro, you're gathered this information, now you can think about it and make a decision. And you need to be able to, it sounds like it's going to be a no-fall zone, right? Mm-hmm. Because if that pro rips or breaks, then you're probably going to take a really long fall and maybe injure yourself. Mm-hmm. So you need to be thinking, can I climb this without falling? Like as if it's a no-fall zone. Mm-hmm. Not that you won't fall, but you don't go into it haphazardly, just pushing beyond your pump.
Right.
You might climb up and you might get too pumped and feel like you can't climb it anymore, or commit anymore, and you'll down climb and just escape and retreat from the risk.
So I guess backtracking a little bit, what was it that got you interested in talking and writing about this? What is it that inspires you to think about attention? What got you sort of driven into that direction?
Looking for a career that would be meaningful and create some purpose in my life. You know, reaching 40 years old, mm-hmm. not being satisfied in my work. I was looking for something, a career in what I enjoy doing, which is climbing. It's mm-hmm. like the only thing that was a unifying thread throughout my life that really resonated with me. And I was known here locally in the Southeast as someone that could deal with fear based on some climbs that I had done. And so I started investigating about why are some climbers afraid, others are more courageous. Mm-hmm. And in investigating it, I found I really enjoyed learning about, attention and mental training. And so it was a nice match between my love for climbing and my love for studying about mental training.
So what were you doing before you started talking about attention? What was your career path looking like?
Well, I got a degree in geology mm-hmm. From University of Colorado in Boulder, and then I had a tour in the Army. Mm-hmm. I was in ROTC, so I had an obligation to fulfill. When I got out of military, I worked in oil fields in Wyoming, as a geologist. And then after a couple of years of that, the price of oil dropped. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people that were in the oil industry lost their jobs, including myself. And so then it's like, up to that point, my life was all set out for me, take this step, then that step. But then all of a sudden, bam, don't know what to do next. Mm-hmm. And so then I just took a bunch of odd jobs, restaurant management and various things, and ultimately moved back here to Tennessee mm-hmm. to take a job with my father's industrial tool distribution company, mm-hmm. just here down the road. And so I was doing that when but again, it was not something I was passionate about and fulfilling. And when I reached, that midlife, 40-ish years time in my life, I think it's like we've lived our life long enough to where a decision for working in a field that doesn't really cause a lot of passion for you or resonate with you, you feel the full impact, mm-hmm. After you reach about 40. You guys aren't there yet.
No.
But then I was really kind of dissatisfied and frustrated working in that business, and so I started looking for, like I said, something to do in climbing.
Mm-hmm. So are you originally from Middle Tennessee? This area?
Pretty much. I was born in New York, but my parents moved south mm-hmm. to here, when I was, 2 or 3 or 4.
The promised land.
Yeah, the promised land. Yeah.
Good food, yeah. Decent climbing, yeah. If you like nice sandstone. People. Nice people, sometimes. We run into some climbers out there on the crag that are just arrogant. It seems to be getting more that way.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if that's your experience, but for me personally, I run into a lot of nice people. I would say the majority of people that I meet are nice, but mm-hmm. it's almost the frequency that I meet these arrogant climbers that are just, oh my God, born and raised in the gym.
Yeah. You gotta be nice to them and turn them.
Yes. Yeah, guide them in
the
the
turned.
right.
They can be turned.
Yeah, yeah. They can be guided in the direction of hippie outdoors. So what? So what drew you to Colorado besides the climbing? You were going to geology, right? You were at
Nothing.
Nothing. No.
Nothing drew me to Colorado besides the climbing.
Yeah,
it was the climbing.
Yeah,
I made a mistake in 1975. I have a twin brother. He and I and a couple of other friends, we all started climbing together in Manchester, and three of us went to Tennessee Tech and I was there for 3 years before going to Colorado. But we made a mistake of taking a trip out west in 1975 to climb Devil's Tower and the Grand Teton, and we made our way through Boulder on the way home, and I saw the Flatirons, and so that year I just put in my papers to transfer out there.
Okay, yeah. That place, the first time I saw my dad's from Denver, and the first time that I saw the Flatirons, which they're not crazy good climbing. I mean, it's relatively easy slab. There's some harder stuff on there, but for something that easy, they are so inspiring to see.
Oh yeah.
The first time you see them, it's just these massive swaths of rock. They're not even that massive. You go to Yosemite, you see stuff a lot bigger, but I don't know. They're just
that whole Boulder Valley is just beautiful.
It is, yeah. So have you? You probably still climb a lot outside today around here, yeah.
I get out as frequently as I can.
Yeah. Where do you spend the most amount of time, you'd say?
Oh, it varies. Just local areas. It might be Foster Falls or Kings Bluff or the Obed. I really like the Obed. It's a little wilder, a little more remote.
Yeah, that's my favorite place in the state.
Yeah, when I can, I like getting over to North Carolina.
Yeah. Foster's, I don't know if you feel this way, but every time I go there, it's like everything's broken. Everything's X'd out, all these broken holds everywhere. You can hardly, it's like half the holds on a route are just broken off. And then the chalk gets washed off. You got to re-find all the broken holds. It has become the glassiest broken crag that I've ever been to.
It's very popular.
It is very popular, yeah. Which for it's not even that long of an approach. It's just so steep. I'm kind of surprised at how popular it is.
It's a nice area. I mean, I like a lot of the areas in the southeast.
Yeah.
So
we go to the Bluff a lot, which I think is, it's a little underrated. People, it obviously gets a lot of use. There's a bit of a graffiti problem out there. A lot of things are glassy, and it sits in the sun. But I can't think of another place where you can get on so much rock in a day. You can just hit route after route after route.
I think Kings Bluff gets a bad rap. I love it up there. It's a quick trip for me, and like you said, it's a short approach. You can just climb a ton.
Yeah. So. Yeah, there's a lot to get on out there. Of course, there's not a lot of hard stuff out there. There's a few hard routes out there, but most everything, in my experience, is somewhere in the 510 to 511 range. There's some 512 stuff out there I've seen. Yep, some pretty hard stuff. I don't think there's anything harder than, a 13B?
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of hard stuff for me.
Yeah. Well, me too. Yeah, no, I get a hard days in every time I go out there, for sure. But that's usually, when I go out to the Bluff, I try to get in a lot of endurance work.
Oh, yeah.
When I'm out there. Very good. So you're out in Colorado, and this is kind of tracking away from the book side of things, but I'm obsessed with that state. I don't know why. I love it. There's so much rock out there. It's so pretty. What were some of your favorite places you got to out there?
Well, when I transferred out there in '76, I was there for 2 more years to finish college. And this was, a full decade before sport climbing. So the areas were Boulder Canyon, El Dorado, down Garden of the Gods, near the springs. So a lot of those were close by and local areas that I went to a lot. So I guess they were sort of my preferred areas.
Front Range.
Yeah,
mostly.
Front Range.
Yep.
Yeah. Can't remember, if I ever went up to Vita Vu or up into Wyoming during that time. But, with studying and limited amount of time to travel, probably mostly those areas. El Dorado was particularly intriguing. There's a time, like, I was right on the tail end when Jim Erickson, Duncan Ferguson, Roger Briggs, those guys were doing a lot of free climbing of the old 8 routes that Core put up. And so being inspired by them and Jim Collins, to really take the climbing, this new discipline of free climbing, to the next level, it was an inspiring time.
Yeah.
It was.
So are you fall more into the trad climbing audience or sport, or what's your preferred?
Well, I started, everything was trad when I started, but I prefer ropes as opposed to bouldering, although I'd like to do more bouldering. But I do a mix of sport and trad.
I feel like, God, every time we talk to people on this podcast, or we talk to people about the podcast, nearly everyone we talk to is not a big fan of bouldering, and I'm
really,
I like it.
How many boulderers have you interviewed?
Not many. I don't think any, actually. Not really. I feel like there's more boulderers than there are people on the ropes, especially here in the South, because we have so much good bouldering here. It's something that I used to really, really like, and now I am just not the biggest fan of. It bores me a little bit. I mean, it's really casual, but it does get a little bit boring. And maybe it's the risk aspect.
I don't know if it's boring. It's just I prefer being up high and feeling the exposure, but I really do enjoy bouldering when I go.
Right.
You go to Stone Fort, or Rocktown. It's just really beautiful boulder problems, but we all have to kind of choose the discipline that resonates with us and just, do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I understand that. A lot of people that we meet around here are just boulderers, or what we call boulder bros, the beanies, and same old. Yeah, we like to boulder. We go out to Rocktown quite a bit, or as much as we can, because it's just like 500 boulder problems out there. Yeah, like something like that. Yeah, an obscene amount. And I was actually just down at I was visiting my buddy from college down in Tuscaloosa, and on the way up, I went up to Hospital Boulders.
Oh, yes.
Have you been there yet?
I have not, but I've heard the new area that the SCC got, right?
Yeah, they got the same gate code kind of structure as Kings Bluff. There's a gate there that you gotta get the SCC and sign up for their gate code. But the amount of potential first ascents at Hospital Boulders is unbelievable. It's everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, so much untouched rock out there. Because, I mean, it hasn't been climbed on that much. I mean, it's a pretty new place. And so a lot of the stuff there, I don't know, walking in, it seemed like maybe 20% has even been climbed on yet.
Yeah, you hear that, boulderers, get some FAs in.
Yeah, right, yeah. Swarm. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of highballs out there, but I find that the percentage of boulderers who actually highball, it's a lot lower. Not many people are willing to go that distance.
I'm not.
Not feeling it.
My bones will break.
What are your thoughts? I'm curious about climbing ethics. I feel like not many people talk to you about ethics. I always talk to you about attention. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on top roping boulders and top roping highballs before you try them. That's become a lot more popular. I don't know if you've noticed that recently in the bouldering scene, but everybody seems to throw up an anchor on bolt something on top of a boulder, throw a gym rope down it, and then try the moves, 12 feet off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, the Brits been doing that for a long time with the head pointing. I think it seems like it's like working a sport climb until you can red point it.
Yep.
Or even a trad climb. You're working out where to stop, exactly what the beta is, how to manage your energy, and then you go for the send. So I don't really have a preference one way or another. I think people need to make those choices and then just accept responsibility for how they choose to climb. Share honestly with how you did it, and then let the chips fall.
See, that's kind of where I stand. I don't personally ever want to do that. I'm not the kind of person to get on a top rope on a boulder, or a high ball for that matter. I'd rather work the moves until I feel comfortable enough to work the next move, and then work that one until I feel comfortable to work the next one, and then down climb or drop. But at the same time, I do think that people just need to be honest with the way that they climb things. And I think for the most part people are. I think climbers are pretty honest. Sometimes maybe not. But I think for the most part people are pretty honest about, okay, I used a rope 103 times on this, and then I climbed it without a rope once. I wouldn't do it that way because it doesn't mean that much to me. But, you know, if that's how you do it and you are honest about that, I don't see much of a problem with that. But, you know, the ethics of climbing here in the Southeast, God, I run into so many people who are really against lowering off of gear on really steep routes, like really, you know, roofs and stuff like that. And I'm not entirely sure where that comes from, because that seems to me, I was listening to, I mean, you were on the Enorma cast. I don't know if you still listen to them, but they were talking about, on their TAPS episode, the controversy behind lowering off of gear and just being responsible to replace that gear if it's too dangerous to rappel off of. What are your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by lowering off of gear? Like you just leave gear in place and abandon the route, or?
Well, so you reach the top of something and you're going to rappel off of it. It's really steep, so you can't effectively clean the route unless you have someone below swinging you back in on the rappel. So you just retie back in and get belayed down, and that makes it easier to clean because you can clip back into the main line and sort of clean that route the same way, because it's too steep. And so there's that danger aspect of rappelling that I think a lot of people get injured on. Not tying backup knots. We just saw that with Brad Gobright, but that was, you know, that was a little bit of a different case. But yeah, a lot of people, you know, going direct, rappelling off of gear versus being belayed back down on something really steep. I feel like if the gear is there and it's really steep and there's no safe, effective way to rappel off that route and clean it, you might as well just get belayed off of it.
Yeah, I think we need to, I guess, think about the impact that leaving gear has on, you know, the environment visually and for whoever wants to enjoy the area. So, you know, we need to be responsible in that way. I think, you know, as far as how if you've climbed a route, you need to clean it now. You know, just. It doesn't seem like it matters to me, you know, how you clean it, as long as you can do it safely and doesn't really influence the ascent that you had, I don't think.
You wouldn't think so, but I have been chewed out and yelled at for having someone belay me off of the anchors because it was too steep for me to effectively rappel and clean off of. And they're so against that in some places.
Well,
at Foster's even.
Maybe find out why they're against it. It might be a safety issue, or
usually what ends up happening is I ask them why they think that's so bad, and they usually just say the physics. It's the physics. It's the physics. That's all they say. They don't actually elaborate on it. They just it's the physics. It's the way that you're equalizing the rope, even though it's, you know, fixed bolted anchors that are already equalized. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's something that I gripe about a lot. Because I don't like strangers coming up and telling me that I can't do something that's safe. But, you know, we also here in the South, I personally love the SEC. I think they do a great job. Our coalition is awesome about replacing bolts and maintaining gear. But I don't really necessarily think that the local scene of climbers is that good at that their own ownership in that gear and feeling the need to replace that on their own. They just rely on the coalition to do it.
Yeah, probably. I mean, when you go to a climbing area, you climb all of these different routes, and probably part of our mind is going, well, I hope they have made sure that the bolts are okay, and never really know who they are.
Right. Yeah. We were just talking to a guy in Uray, Clay Lippincott, who's a Wyoming climber originally, which I don't know if have you heard that name at the time you were in Wyoming? Were you doing much climbing?
Yeah. I was there like 1980 to 84.
I think he started the Wyoming, was it Rock Climbers Festival? Do you remember the name of that?
That International Climbers Festival?
I think so. Yeah.
Did
it
he
is.
Start that or Skinner?
I think he was with Skinner. Him and Skinner are good friends. He said they used to train a lot together. way back. But yeah, he runs a bolting nonprofit out of Phoenix, Arizona, and they were showing us some videos about some of the work that they do, replacing bolts and whatnot. And I think from what he was telling me is you get a lot of people out there who think that they know what they're talking about when it comes to bolts, and they just trust things blindly. What was he showing us? Some glue-ins that he popped with like barely any torque.
Mm-hmm.
He just had a crowbar and just popped them right out. And it's because someone hadn't even done their research. They just put a bolt in.
Yeah, I think the whole thing about bolts and replacing bolts is going to get much more standardized, and record keeping of it, even databases where you can keep track of which routes were rebolted, when, with what kind of gear.
Who did it?
Who did it,
Yep.
yeah. And to maintain some kind of a quality assurance.
Yeah.
Because more and more climbers getting into the sport and not necessarily getting involved with maintaining the routes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It does seem like we have a bit of a surplus of young climbers, and I'm 24 years old. I'm a young climber, but I've been climbing for a pretty long time, and it seems that we have a lot of people who are joining the scene. They're getting really invested into climbing, but they're not getting invested into what it takes to do your part. That leave no trace kind of principle, that aspect of, don't rely on everyone else to fix your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Take out the time.
That's an important mental training concept.
It is,
Take
yeah.
responsibility and for yourself and the problems that you have, and also for your part in whatever you're interacting with, like climbing the routes, and do your part to maintain it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Logan, did you have any questions?
Honestly, a lot of everything that you've talked about makes a lot of sense to me.
There's we've been working more with more advanced or elite athletes over the last few years, and maybe back up a step. The basic falling commitment clinics and material that we teach over the years, mostly we've found that the clients that we get are in the 5'9" to 5'12" range, and so probably because it's called falling and commitment, and so falling is an obvious, fear that when people are experiencing that, they say, "Oh, I want to take that course." But when we started working with more elite athletes, we found that we needed to develop new material that addressed their particular needs, and specifically around pressure, how you deal with pressure, performance anxiety, or ego, motivation. Because whether they're a competitor or a sponsor climber, they experience a lot of pressure that they largely put on themselves. They feel like I need to produce in order to satisfy my sponsors. I need to, achieve a certain rank, on this competition in order to feel justified for being a competitor. Things like that. And so we developed what we call the free mind material that digs into behavior, motivation, the mind, the ego, to understand that process more. And so some really important concepts that are kind of foundational in it is knowing what do competitors or elite climbers do that's limiting. Well, one thing that's limiting is they tie their identity, like the sense of who they are, to the outcome. So I'm an important climber because I achieved this rank, on the competition, or because I sent this route. So really tight association between my identity and the outcome. Well, what's limiting about that is when you don't achieve those outcomes, you feel depressed and disillusioned, frustrated, emotional states that are not really how you'd like to be in life. So by separating identity from outcome, then we can start seeing the outcome more objectively. I had certain amount of skill, mental, physical, technical skill going into this comp or this route. On this particular day, how I was feeling and it all came together perfectly with this stressor of the climb or the comp that created this outcome. Okay, now from that point of view, I can look curiously at, like, what did I do well, to at least achieve this much of the goal. And number two, what do I still need to learn? Obviously I didn't get to the top. I didn't get number one. But even if you do succeed, it can be helpful to also look at what can you still learn. Because there's always something that you can refine mentally or physically in your effort to perform better the next time. So, unhooking identity from outcome. And a psychologist, Carol Dweck, in her book Mindset, talks a lot about this, like a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is having this identity tied to outcome, and then a growth mindset is when you start separating it apart, where you can look at your effort, look at the behavior that you had, and then see it more objectively, and then you're more willing to, like, do something to change and thereby grow.
So I was a competitive swimmer for about 18 years or so, and one thing that I noticed with swimmers, particularly guys, was they would get to a point in their career of swimming, 15, 16 years old. They're getting a lot taller, and they got a big ego, and they think, I think I pretty much got my stroke figured out. I don't need to work on my timing. I don't need to improve my stroke. I've got it worked out. Now I just need to train harder. And every time a swimmer would think that, they would plateau because they stopped thinking about improving. And I think what you're talking about is maybe a willingness to improve, that you need to have a willingness to improve. And if you don't have that willingness to improve, you're not going to get better. That fixed mindset is so limiting for an athlete, not even just for an athlete. I mean, I think just for everybody. Yeah. So where do you teach these classes? Where do you do that at?
Well, the free mind training is, we do 1-to-1 with individual athletes, and we do those remotely, via phone, Skype, or something like that. Weekly or every other week calls, assigned drills. We have an online journal where we can set assignments, have the athlete, write down observations. We can give feedback. So we have that back and forth medium in that way. And then get together in person, when possible, to do some drills together on the wall. Mm-hmm. The following commitment clinics that we teach, we do it all over the place. Right now we have a network of trainers in the U.S., 10 trainers in the U.S. and 4 abroad.
So is that also individual, or are you trying to do that in group? I know you did one at the Ascent back when I was in high school, and it was a big group one.
They tend to be groups.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, Monday, heading out to do a tour in the Southeast, we have about 17 clinics scheduled where I'll be teaching with my lead trainer and a new trainee that we're training to become a trainer.
Gotcha.
The last part of his training process.
So you've got a pretty extensive network of people that are working with you on these falling clinics, and yeah. Yeah,
I've been doing this solo for 20 years, from the mid-'90s to, well, let's say 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
From the mid-'90s to about 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And then during that time, I was really refining the material. It was like extremely rough, in the beginning, but, you teach something over and over again to a bunch of different people, and, you can slowly refine the subtleties. And right now, the following commitment material is in a very specific, unified structure that I think is really powerful. It is very simple, and the simple structure is you have 5 processes for focusing attention, just 5. And you do 3 of them at stopping points on a climb. You need to rest, think, and make a decision. And when you climb, you do a moving process. When you fall, you do a falling process. And then we have one process that overlays all of them, and that's like a simple meditation. You need to know what process you're focusing your attention on, and then be able to develop the ability to recognize when you get distracted and redirect it. So that's simple, right? But it doesn't mean that it's easy to do. And so with that simple structure, I can train trainers and hold them accountable for making sure that they're teaching this simple structure and understand the foundation of why it's structured that way. You know, we have some core tenets around use of attention, developing awareness, incremental learning, that they need to really own and live in their own climbing, but also in their teaching. And so that helps me maintain, you know, like the consistency of the training across trainers.
Gotcha. So if someone was interested in doing this, how would they go about signing up for one of those classes?
We have on warriorsway.com, we have a full calendar, you know, and so it's on the bottom of the home page, and we also have a training coaching page. So you just look at the calendar, and you can just hover over the different clinics and see where they're located. And or we also have the list of our trainers, and you can go to a particular trainer if you know that person and want to take training from them. You can see what clinics are coming up for that particular trainer. So
you said you're getting ready to head out through the southeast. How long are you going to be gone? You said 17, is that right? 17 clinics?
17 clinics. We're leaving Monday, coming back March 6th.
Whew, that's a while.
Yeah, we're going to be all the way up to Richmond, Virginia, and all the way over to Baton Rouge.
So you're traveling by yourself that whole time, or with your team?
With Laura Sabrin, my lead trainer, and our Nick, our trainee.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I think that's about it for time today. Looks like we're wrapping up. So we really appreciate you coming to talk to us.
Yeah,
and
nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We'll catch you guys later.
Thank you.